Hello and welcome to the Inquisitorial Archive. My name's Kevin O'Rourke and today I'll be talking about the third session I've run of Only War. I'll put a link to the previous session down below. Warning once more, there are spoilers to the adventure in the back of the book. I have changed things, but there's, by and large, the story is quite similar. Where we left our heroes, their squad had managed to capture the Prometheum refinery back from the orcs. However, they suspected that this might not be the sum total of the orcs, as they hadn't found many orc corpses, and also due to the fact that they really didn't believe this many orcs could capture the refinery, seeing as it had autocannons and such. With this in mind, they set about refortifying the area. The gate was smashed. They set about making plans to defend the area. They realised that with their small numbers and the size of the facility, they wouldn't be able to maintain a proper watch, but they still tried to maintain some level of watch. I won't be talking too much about Trooper Love or Kamazar Barca, as neither of their players were at the session. Kamazar Barca wasn't on this; he wasn't there previous session. He was on the mission anyway. But Engineer Kasugi was there once more. He spent the majority of the time for a while trying to repair the facilities, as he worried that the machine spirits were agitated by the enhancements the orcs had performed, and that it may result in them exhibiting the rat, which in the Prometheum refinery means possibly exploding, killing everyone. This was fine. The players started to try to refortify the gate, and as well they had the idea, after I drew the map of, they had it last session actually, but they started acting it out. It was Trooper Love's idea, his player's idea anyway, and they noticed that there was a bit of a stream going through the area and there was a small island, so they decided we'll have this as our fallback point, and they fortified it up, set up some level of barricades, and set up and loaded the heavy bolters there. They found a grot, I think, at one of the points. Gretchen, who had gotten past her defences, and not having interrogation, Sergeant McBrandier decided to interrogate him. Though his method, as he described him, was his character got a bag and started beating the Gretchen off walls in the bag, because he didn't have proper interrogation, so he was just being a tog. He got very little information, but he did confirm their suspicions that they hadn't killed the orc leader, so they probably hadn't killed all the orcs. All the orcs here anyway. I don't think they ever were under the impression that they might have killed all the orcs in the world. There's still plenty more there. They were doing pretty, they're fortifying the defences, and they were, trying to repair the walls best they could. But then they saw a Valkyrie that was crashing and come under attack from orc fighter bombs. They saw two people parachute out. One of them, unfortunately, their parachute was riddled with bullets, and they plummeted down and surely must have died. The other went down. Sergeant McBrandier called command and asked if they could, for advice on what to do should they go and retrieve him. His command asked him if the orcs, if you're send troopers off, can you maintain the position without those troopers? He said no. They said don't leave your post then. He was reluctant to do so, however, and he decided to disobey orders, not telling command, of course. Decided to save that in case, for later, in case they survived the orcs. But he sent out Trooper Jorgensen to drive the Chimera and Medic Blackthrone. So they managed to go out, and they found, when they came to the area, they found a person whose chute hadn't been riddled. They were strung up, their parachute caught in the branches of the trees. They're hanging, the feet about 5 meters off the ground, so they drove beneath them, climbed up through the turret, and cut them down using the manual swords. Unfortunately, it had taken a bit long to get there, so this person had a concussion, did become unconscious. Trooper Blackthrone, former medicated him, said to keep him stable, but he wasn't sure if he'd wake up anytime soon. At least not without more extensive medical facilities. He didn't want to perform any kind of surgery or anything in the immediate surroundings, especially given the possibility of orcs showing up. So they started moving back towards base. After they closed the hatch, they heard that Todd and the Thundercat was on Terror Cat. I keep calling them Thundercats because some players made jokes, but the Terror Cats, one of the Terror Cats was climbing around the roof. They managed to drive back to base. It jumped off after a little while, but it still was a reminder that the jungle, there's things other than orcs they have to worry about in this particular environment. So they moved back to base. They put this person in with the stormtroopers, where they were healing up slowly. It's like, okay. They tried to refortify the door again. Unfortunately, they haven't gotten a working door, so they were just putting up barricades, and they came over the forklift they'd found in the refinery to move some of the stuff out to try and let the Chimera go through. Quite time consuming, unfortunately, to set up those defences. They'd taken materials from the orcs and built an additional layer onto the living quarters using rocks and things, so they just got it on top and they started firing down rocks and bringing them to try and basically have some kind of an impediment to orcs coming in, because they're worried the orcs will try to get through there. One of the players mostly kept towards fortifying the area and hunkering down and refining their battle plan a bit. Trooper Jorgensen was on the night watch for the majority of the nights, which was difficult for him and his comrade. But one of the nights, they actually they saw someone in the trees. They weren't able to get a proper look. It looked far too gaunt to be an orc, or at least not an orc. They'd seen no orcs. They'd seen they were that small. Quite pale looking, wasn't the right colour unless they wore paint on of some kind. Quite pale even for a human. But he didn't manage to get a proper look. When he brought up his long lads to draw a bead, this thing retreated back. He raised the alarm. Sheriff McBrander came, but once they established they couldn't see any more, they put it down to either it's some kind of local wildlife, despite the fact being humanoid, or it could be one of the locals kind of eyeing them up, wondering if they could steal a supply of them or something like that, or potentially trying to make contact but being a bit concerned to do so due to how heavily armed they are. A few theories went about, but they went back to bed. One of the nights after this, a number of Gretchen managed to get in. The players managed to account for a few of them. One of them had gotten particularly light-fingered and had decided to go through some of the player cards, different things. He took a belt buckle from Sergeant McBrander's gear. It took a tube of sacred unguents, which had half coated itself in wasting the sacred unguents, and then had decided to. It had mistakenly thought that Trooper Blackthrone's antibiotics that he had on him being a medic were some sort of food, so started eating them. When when he pulled off the cap, he did manage to rouse Trooper Blackthrone, who jumped on him and started grabbing him and shaking him, and the Gretchen started banging him with the bottle, spraying them all across the floor. And they he noticed there were one or two other Gretchen nearby, and they tried to run away. And Sergeant McBrander and Inquisitor Kasugi managed to kill a few, but they didn't express, when they were describing their characters, running out, any concern for the antibiotics that are no doubt spilled on the floor from this action. Plus it was dark, so unfortunately the group was quite low on antibiotics after that point. And I said, well, if people get heavily injured and you're here for a while, this could actually mean somebody dies, because you don't have antibiotics to kill an infection, that kind of thing. It's like, okay, they accepted it. It's unfortunate, but on the third day they were attacked. They heard the roar of some engines, not quite as loud as chimeras, but they took notice, and the alarm was raised. They were concerned they were under attack, and the various troops started trying to run to locations to. Unfortunately, they weren't able to designate out. Okay, let's all go to this location, because they know what angle they're being attacked from. There's so few of them, it could be attacked from any angle. So they roughly had decided to just run to that side, have to defend. Trooper Jorgensen was sleeping, was roused by the alarm, and he started running. Unfortunately, they hadn't re-specified after the first one where they were keeping the Chimera, so the Chimera was near the front door, and the sleeping quarters weren't that near the front door, so he was running full pelt for a while. After a while, it was actually taking so long for him to get there and driving the vehicle, because the compound's quite a large area. I actually just said, well, Trooper Law isn't here, we'll say he can barely drive the vehicle, even though he doesn't have the skill. But he can drive the vehicle. The first thing out of the trees was 2 orc war buggies armed with twin-linked rocket launches, and they started blowing holes into the base, but into the walls of the base. They started firing them off, and they didn't hit with every shot, but they hit with a couple. And the player characters then said, "Oh, we're going to shoot them with the auto canister there, even though they're not fishing with them." I said, "Yeah, the problem is you, in all your time you said you're doing defenses, are never once, aside from the first time when, you know, Trooper Jorgensen was examining one of them, noticed, oh, the orcs hadn't loaded this right, so that might be," and he loads that one. They never specified they were loading the other ones, so unfortunately to say, look, this time you didn't specify you're doing it. They accepted that. So they had to spend quite a while. Because they were proficient in these weapons, I put on some additional time that they would have to spend loading them. It's something they'll remember in future, I'm quite sure, anyway, if they're in a similar situation. But they started firing off the weapons when they could, as well as firing off a couple of death-like lasgun shots. Inquisitorial Kasugi was firing off his ballistic McKendrite's compact las pistol. They're doing pretty well in the defence. They managed to blow vehicles with a fairly spectacular, and the orc vehicles were driving back and forth, firing off their missiles every turn, going about 100 metre area, just twirling around, firing things, just not want to be hit particularly much. However, one of the vehicles had been stunned one of the turns and was just driving directly forward. The other vehicle was I described the orc driver just going, "Get out of the way, get out of the way." We're like, "Get out of the way!" But they weren't, so he was getting concerned. But the next turn, this vehicle that had been stunned was destroyed, and the description of being destroyed had it flipping over like this, and shortly after this one was destroyed in an explosion. So there still was still some rubble. The orc infantry hadn't arrived yet. The perimeter was only 50 metres out, that had been clear cut to make a killing field. When the orc showed up, it was actually a lot of fun and quite refreshing compared to the other 40k games. Nobody has Forbidden Lore Xenos. Nobody has any Forbidden Lores yet, I don't believe. And I just described them as I believed their characters might perceive them, especially from a distance of 50 metres away. They saw a orc who had a large stick, and there was all sorts of wires and stuff hanging from it, and he had hair that was out on ends, and he just started jumping up and down and shouting "wah" and building up, getting louder and louder, until eventually it was a weird boy. He failed his role to actually manifest power. I thought to give players a bit of a heads up, plus more cinematic to him. Although he cinematically succeeded in doing the power, he shot green lightning, and it hit the orc vehicle. It didn't hit any of the players or anywhere near them that had been destroyed. I was like, okay, fine. But then I described as well, there was a group of 5 orcs, including one quite large one, who had what I described as these looked like some kind of high-tech spears, though crudely manufactured, with fire on the end. So they're like, okay, what the hell is this? They didn't know what it was. These were actually orc burning boys. But I said, well, I'm not going to describe them necessarily as blowtorches, especially from 50 metres away. And I was like, well, what do the models kind of look like? It's like, yeah, it does look a bit like a blowtorch from 50 metres away. And plus, who brings a blowtorch into battle? I imagine there's a few people, but it's going to be a bit odd, especially for these effectively green troops. So they're quite confused by that, but they were trying to shoot them, and shortly after this, the big mech who's in charge of all the orcs showed up. The orcs trying to recapture the medium refinery, and he had a big sort of wrench with an axe on half of it, and he had this gun which was shooting with energy. It's sort of a bluey plasma ball. One time he actually managed to successfully fire a shot off, actually hit Trooper Jorgensen later in the fight, and successfully managed to hit, and he I think he got a crit for something on the energy table, something like that. So Trooper Jorgensen lost use of his arm, which being a sniper, and that was his main arm, that was his offhand. And it dropped him for a turn. He was stunned. It was like, for a second everyone thought he's dead. But I survived. They kept up their hail of fire, and the orcs managed to get up. There was also, I enjoyed describing the looters as I described, like someone seemed to have heavy bolt. One of them seems to have a heavy bolter. One seems to have what looks like 2 heavy stubbers that have been welded together, and another one looks like he's got an autocannon that was being chopped in half, like it's a short barreled autocannon of some kind. And the players are firing back they're firing their autocannons and stuff, although they're inaccurate because they weren't proficient with these. But it was kind of interesting to see their reactions. The the orc looters didn't hit particularly often, but that's not necessarily a problem. They were cause concern for the players. They were able to successfully kill the big mech. Some of the orcs managed to get as far as the wall. The wall had been heavily damaged by the war buggies beforehand with the rockets. I described the orcs with the spears carving through, and then I told the players what they were at that point out of character. It's like, because it didn't make a lick of sense to them. Maybe I shouldn't have. Maybe I should have kept the mystery up with these fire spear orcs. Would terrify the crap out of them. But they managed to cut a bigger hole cinematically. They were just running up and taking cover. But I said, yeah, they're cutting a hole because it doesn't matter. There's already big enough holes for orcs to get through. Just having it turn to one big hole is, it kind of gives a bit of a warning if these things get up close. But the players managed to repel the attack. The orcs eventually moved back. The big mech had been killed. After this point, they contacted command. Eventually, they were trying to fortify back up the base. I think that the players did pretty well that were there. Sergeant McBrandier spent a couple of turns firing the autocannon. He was down towards the south of the base. He had spent a little while hitching a ride with the guy Mayor, so there was a couple of turns where he wasn't terribly able to aid people. But that was just because they didn't know what, they could have been a feint by the orcs. It's entirely possible that they could have guys attacking from another position. Plus he did help initially, and he helped towards the end firing the Chimera's multi-laser, as well as using the Get Them order, which gives the bonus damage and stuff. So it's like, okay. Defending the base was pretty interesting. The players managed to hold up because of the defences. And they weren't doing too badly. They were trying to be inventive. It's a good way of introducing things. I kind of like the scenario, how it works out. You could easily change it and take it. Like, if you don't want a dead world, you could take out the terror cats and all that stuff. Could just be in forests, or you could just add in some orcs instead of terror cats. Maybe a few orc commandos going around the place, or you could modify the scenario, because I'm certainly not using Underworld it's meant to be on. I'm just changing the aspect of Underworlds I want for further on. So the players managed to repel them, and they contacted command. And unfortunately, then Sergeant McBrandier had to come clean about, because he said, "Oh yes, that guys come to our base who will parachute down." And they asked one or two questions about this. Unfortunately, he had to reveal how that guy got there. And they're like, "Right, you're going to talk to the captain when you come back." But they were getting relieved. So they'd be able to leave by, I think within a day. Some Valkyries had shown up, and they deployed. There was an entire platoon. There was like 6 squads of guys coming off, led by a lieutenant, and some Adeptus Mechanicus personnel, and 3 sentinels. And the guys are just looking to if we had this to defend the place, it would be no problem. But command suddenly were able to free up the forces now that the main body of orcs have been repelled. So yeah, they went back to base. The captain had an unusual talk with Sergeant McBrandier, which left Sergeant McBrandier confused, relieved, and afraid, because their captain, who they kind of picked up was a bit odd early on, well, he was berated for disobeying orders, even though the captain said, "I've done similar things myself in the past, doesn't mean I have to like it when you do it." He was told by the captain that he had earned both a level of respect from him as well as earned his ire. As although he had done similar things before in the past himself, it does not mean he condones his actions. However, the young man they had saved, who was about 12 years old, when the players he seemed to have, when he initially thought it was a compact las, what they discovered that this was the las pistol that was just a size for a juvenile, and good quality ones. Were thinking, "Oh, must be noble," but that this was actually the nephew of the subsector governor. So they were rewarded for this. Like, "Well, you're now gunnery sergeant." He plays like, "However, because of your actions, both the parts I like about it and the parts I dislike," that they would have to that if he had any special tasks, he'd be looking toward their squad to fulfill them, which caused a bit of an upset with the sergeant. But he accepted. He was happy that he wasn't taken out. And as well, when the players went out, "Well, shouldn't we have a corporal?" And it's like, okay. So I had the next day, the Sergeant McBrandier talked to the captain, the captain called him up. He's like, okay, who do you think in your squad would be a gold corporal? And he said out, well, this person for this reason, this person for this reason. It was like, and the captain made this informed decision based on this. After he'd taken time to read the reports, and he wanted the sergeant's personal opinion. It was like, okay, so now there is Corporal Jorgensen, who was so delighted. He's thinking he's going for the poster boy kind of thing. A little bit of a small promotion is something I'm sure he'll be quite pleased with. The majority of the squad spent their time healing up in the medical facility, the small sort of on-site hospital back at the supply depot. Not really a hospital. They were healing up beside some of the Bronte long knives, so they talked to one or two of them. Especially newly minted Corporal Jorgensen spent his time trying to seduce Trooper Monique from the Bronte long knives. So that was interesting. She was in there for getting healed up or whatever, and she was able to describe, give a bit more background on the world and certain aspects, and the guys went off and they were talking about different things. I kind of went quickly through that week, and towards the next week, they've been given a week to heal up, and we ended the session with them being told that there's going to be a push into enemy territory. They already had heard rumours of this from Monique, but now it was confirmed to them that they were also going to be one of the lead units in this maneuver forward. And they managed to successfully get most of their gear. We start off, I think I've got a list here. Yeah, they successfully managed to get most of the gear, including 2 months rations. I've been there for a while. Except instead of getting 1 tent each, now they're going to be out in the wilds. Instead of getting 1 tent each, for the first time, the logistics role with them, it hurt them. They get finely tailored dress uniforms size for Ogrons, which there was a bit of Sergeant Brand was paranoid about bringing these back. He was like, okay, well, roll this Commodore Administrator, that he didn't think the Administrator guys were going to like them just bringing them back. After a call with them, they shouldn't have them. So they're like, okay, how do we actually do this? So somehow they went to Jimmy, who was he's a lieutenant and a nobleman, not enough in the Bronte and Long Knives, but he comes off as a bit of a scumbag to the guys. But he'd already told him he was a man who would get things for enough to need them, and they presented him to dressing room. Was like, look, we don't know how to get rid of these. He said, look, I'll take them off your hands, no problem. It's something free anyway, so he's going to take them off their hands. He could get the fabric cut up and just done whatever, various different things, or maybe he did know things. Like, okay, but somehow Sergeant McBrandier managed to, being new at this and being quite naive about stuff, managed to talk himself into that. He's like, well, of course you're doing this to me, so I owe you a favour, which Jimmy was surprised at, but Lieutenant Jimmy just went like, oh, don't worry about it, but I won't be too harsh, I'm always kind to my friends. Like, somehow he had gotten some free stuff, although it wasn't stuff he was pretty high demanded, and gotten a favour just to get rid of these things. So the session went pretty well. Happy with a lot of rules. I'm happy with how it's playing out. There's little niggly things. I did say to the players, like, look, I've actually been thinking about it. I said I'm not going to change it immediately or anything. I'm not sure if I will change it, but I want to get my feedback from players. What do you think about the fact that willpower its two attributes are willpower and psychers? I said I don't particularly like this because it's actually screwing over everyone who isn't a psyker for getting their willpower up, and you kind of need that to defend against other. Not that I want to screw over psychers, but like, what if we change it to something else? And one of the players, the sergeant player, Sergeant was like, I'm completely biased. I think you should do it. He was completely honest, but I was like, I think you should do it. Similar situation with Sir Kasugi. Not so positive, but still I think largely positive about it with Trooper Jorgensen, who was there. But Medic Blackthrone, his character, his player was like, I'm not too sure that we should be messing around with it, unfortunately. He's honest about it, so I'm not going to change it at the moment. I do find it a bit unfortunate that that's the way the XP rules work out. But overall, having fun. The guys can move forward. So next session, they'll be going into their second mission, and it'll be quite fun. This time they haven't gotten additional equipment that have been coming out everywhere. Although I think Medic Blackthrone using his wheeling and dealings and talking to Jimmy, managed to trade off quite a substantial amount of rations. Given, remember, they're noble born units, so as I've described before, they have like dried quail and pheasant and all these different things. He gave away, I think it was about 2 months worth of rations, or something to that effect, to give to the. He gave away these and was able to get 3 demolition charges, which he consulted. Sergeant McBrander said, "I don't want to be irritating the Ministradum guys. I think we're after throwing a bit of heat on us. We need to keep a low profile, so don't go looking for additional equipment." It's like, okay, fine, no problem. But Trooper Bracknell said, like, okay, you don't want me going to them for demolitions. Then they discussed. I was like, oh, you don't want me doing them. How about if I, go and try and source it from other contacts who they both know who they're talking about, or other people. Sergeant McBrander said, like, look, if you do that, I don't know about it. He took that approach, like, I don't know about it. He was kind of condoning it, but unofficially only. It's like, okay, grand. But he managed to get to demolition charges, so we look set to have another adventure going. I said, oh, they did find out the because they had saved the subsector governor's son, or nephew, sorry, that when they had enough leave allowed, that they had received an invitation to come to Sanguine Palace, which is the home of the subsector governor. Which would be quite interesting, and they were already warned by their captain. Sergeant McBrander was warned by their captain that court can be more, potentially far more deadly than the battlefield. So having fun with it, still feeling quite positive about the game. I haven't found anything that's really annoyed me yet about Only War. Little things, nothing's perfect, but I think I'll leave it there, and I look forward to giving you the next report. I'll see you again. Goodbye.